Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you again. I'm Brad Macbeth. Welcome to the Simple Plan Live. And today we have an interesting topic. Want to tell you, of course, as always, that you can find us on Facebook at Macbeth Group. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter, we're at Cash Coach Canada. And Instagram, we are also at Macbeth Group. So thanks very much for being with us today. We're going to look at one of those interesting questions today. In fact, the first thing we're going to do is switch our camera view here because it's kind of gone wonky. There we go. What we're going to look at today is not really a new take, but we're going to look at the tax-free savings account versus RRSP. Absolutely the number one question we get. But we're going to look at it kind of in the context of what's going on today and why there might be another reason you want to be giving consideration to this. As I've said many times in the past, everybody wants it to be a simple question, simple answer, whether it's, well, if you make this much, do this. If you make that much, do the other. Unfortunately, it's not really that simple a question, and so we're going to have a bit of a look at that. It really is a complex, long-term tax planning question. So anyway, we're going to have a good look at that today. I want to thank our sponsors, which seem to have disappeared here. Where are we? There we go. The Simple Plan, life insurance. I've said before, this is a fantastic time. There's a great little window here in which to get the life insurance that you need because rates are lower than they're probably ever going to be. They've gone down continually for many, many years because we're getting healthier, medical advances, all sorts of things. But interest rates have a significant effect on life insurance premiums, and we are in a very low interest rate environment. It's probably going to stay that way for some time to come, and so that means insurance premiums are going to have to go up. And we've already seen some of those premiums, some of the rates for life insurance go up. So also with the pandemic, the amount of insurance you can get without having to go through blood tests and all this other stuff is much higher than usual. You can get up to $2 million worth of coverage now without having to get stuck with a needle. So great time to get life insurance. If you want to know about that, head over to thesimpleplan.com, getthesimpleplan.com/quotes. You can check prices at all major Canadian insurers and compare them. Also, if you're not sure how much you should have, you can go to getthesimpleplan.com/how much to calculate how much life insurance coverage your family needs to be fully protected. And we have another great giveaway, as always, today. If you haven't looked at it yet, the Simple Plan Retirement Calculator. That's at bit.ly/SP Retire Calc. That's bit.ly/SP Retire Calc. And by going there, you can calculate how big a nest egg you need to accumulate to live in the lifestyle that you want to live in retirement. All right, so we are talking about RSP TFSA today. With a bit of a different twist, I'll call it the pandemic twist. Things have changed a lot. It's mid-August, in the midst of from a weather point of view, very beautiful warm summer. But it's been a strange year, to be sure. And we know that the greatest certainty right now is uncertainty. We just don't know what's coming next. And things are happening, and they're going to continue to happen that we can't necessarily plan well for. And so this perpetual question of tax-free savings account versus RRSP, everybody wants their financial planning to be simple, cut and paste, don't have to think about it much, make a decision, take some action, and I never have to deal with it. Unfortunately, it's just not that way. And so you really need to be taking care with this. And the TFSA versus RRSP question is a much more complicated one than people would like it to be. Everyone would like to be able to say, well, it's this or it's that for me, and I go down the road. but it's not. It is a complex tax planning question. And the number one kind of underlying premise of the tax-free savings account versus RRSP question is, what's your tax rate going to be in retirement compared to how it is today? And that's because with the tax-free savings account, all the money comes out without any taxation on it because you paid tax up front when you put the money in. You put in after-tax dollars to your TFSA. With an RRSP, you're putting in untaxed dollars. Most people experience that in the form of getting a tax refund. But that's just because dollars are not being taxed before they go into the RRSP. When they are being taxed is when you take them out of the RRSP. And so if you put $1 in, expecting to get $10 out in retirement, well, you can anticipate that you're going to pay about 10 times more tax than you would if you just paid it before it went in. However, if you're in a lower tax bracket when you retire than you are today, then probably makes sense to put it in the RRSP. So that's a core part of the question. But here's the spin that's interesting for the time we're living in. And that is our government, and I'm not critiquing this, I'm just pointing it out as fact. Our government is spending money at a pace that really has never been seen before. Certainly the only other time you could point to that might have been slightly similar would have been the Second World War. And so the amount of money the government is spending is stupendous, and primarily in the form of social entitlements. In Canada, there are things like the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, all sorts of different things that have been aimed at businesses, landlords, what have you, just to try to keep the economy propped up as best as they reasonably can. Again, I'm not critiquing this or suggesting they shouldn't be doing it. I'm somewhat agnostic on that. But they are doing it, and so they're spending at an astonishing rate money that we don't have. I don't know where it's at right now, but last count was, somewhere in the neighborhood of several $100 billion of new debt. That is going to have an effect going forward. The other aspect, of course, is they're not taking in nearly the revenues that they normally do because they generate revenues from income tax. Well, a lot of people are off work. They generate it from consumption taxes like GST. And so they're not getting the money there because people aren't spending. They're being careful with their money, or you can't spend it. There's lots of businesses closed. So government is in a very difficult position, and they're running up big, big, big deficits each year right now. So what does that mean going forward? Well, and we are in an historically low interest rate environment. So a significant portion of government expenditure goes to pay for the money they've borrowed. They pay interest, just like we all pay interest when we borrow money. The government pays interest when it borrows money. So a big portion of the government's budget goes to paying interest. Well, right now, they're not paying nearly as much interest because interest rates are at those historical lows. Going forward, however, there's two things that are going to play a part in that. One is they've borrowed this massive new amount of money, so that's going to require more interest payments. And the other is interest rates at some point are, I'll say bound to, but let's at least say very likely to increase. And when they do, they may increase quite substantially. What would have been considered normal interest rates in the past. So let's say the Bank of Canada rate, normally might have been in the 4%, 5% range. It's been well below that for a long, long time. And it's, I actually haven't checked recently, but I think it's at 0.25 right now. So 1/4%. So if the interest rates, the interest rate that the government has to pay on its debt increases that much, it's going to have a very significant effect on government budgets. All right, that's a great lecture on economics. What has that got to do with TFSA versus RRSP? Well, here's the catch. If government is dramatically short of money, they can borrow it, but if they're dramatically short of money because of their interest payments, they're not going to want to borrow more money. What can they do? Well, the only thing they can do is increase taxes. And this is where you might have some additional concern about the RRSP. So let's go to the calculator and have a look at our TFSA versus RRSP calculator. Just make it a little bigger there on the screen. All right, and our fictional people live in Ontario. They're making, we'll call it $100,000 a year. So this is how we're getting at tax rates, is we're identifying what's the taxable amount of income you're going to have when you contribute versus the taxable income you'll have when you withdraw, because that's basically where the amount of tax comes from. And bear in mind, it's not just how much is being taxed, like whether you have 100,000 being taxed or 50,000, but we have a graduated taxation system in Canada. So if you're paying tax on $100,000, the rate of tax that you pay is higher than what you would pay on 50,000. So this is just a 1 year projection, right? So it takes 1 year of contribution and projects it forward. But in this case, what we're suggesting is the person's taxable income when they contribute is 100,000 and their taxable income when they withdraw is 50,000. And therefore, we've got the result, which is over 25 years, we would do better to have put the money in an RRSP. Now, that's good. That's a nice cut and dried situation. So let's say that the taxable income when we withdraw is going to be the same. Whoop. So it's 100,000 and 100,000. Then we're going to find that the amount of money we have to live on in retirement, because that's really the question we're trying to get at in the tax-free savings account versus RRSP question, is equal in this case. Now, I think, yes, so in this case, we're investing the RRSP refund. Of course, what most people do is spend the RRSP refund, in which case now you're going to see you'd be better off putting it in the tax-free savings account. So that's a factor as well. But that's not our point today. So, but what happens if the government says, well, we need more tax revenue in the future. So tax rates are going to go up, which they deal with either by adjusting tax brackets or they deal with by increasing the rates on each bracket. So again, our calculator here is kind of simple, so we can only affect it by changing the taxable income. So let's see what we do there. So taxable income when we contribute, but let's say that our taxable income when we withdraw is $75,000. Well, I'll turn off we'll reinvest our RSP refund. Well, in that case, you'd be better off with your RRSP, yet again. However, if government has mucked around with things, so let's say, for example, you were getting $75,000 in your in income, but it was all coming from capital gains. Well, the capital gains tax is only applied to half of your gain. So what that could mean is when we retire, now instead of having a $75,000 taxable income, because we're living off the proceeds of our investments, our equity and our stock investments, our mutual fund, equity mutual fund investments, now they're saying, no. We're going to take the tax on all of that now because the government's broke and you're obviously better off than many. So now we're going to be paying on the $150,000. And so what we find out is that actually puts us in a position where it's equal whether we put it into the TFSA or the RRSP. But that's, again, only because we're investing the refund. If we spend the refund, now we really need to put it into the TFSA. So I'm sure this is starting to make your head swim a little bit in terms of the numbers, but here's the principle that's being exposed underneath all of this. And that is that if, and we can't know, I mean, a calculator like this just assumes tax rates are going to remain the same. Of course they don't. Governments fiddle with them based, they set policy based on ideology and other factors in the economy. And so ask yourself this: what do I think is going to happen in a future where government has much more debt than they had anticipated, and they are facing higher interest rates than they've been dealing with? Well, there's only two things government can do. That's raise revenues or cut expenses. Just, hey, that sounds like us, right? That's what we do with our budget. I increase my income or I spend less money. Well, they're in the same position. And so in terms of raising income, they only have a few options, which is raising tax rates, increasing the things that are taxed, and those are really both effectively the same thing. And so if we're looking at situations where the government's going to be pursuing more tax revenues, if we have our money in an RRSP, which is taxable, it's a target that's much easier for the government to get at simply by raising tax rates. Whereas if the money's inside a tax-free savings account, well, the promise was by government that that would not be taxed. Now that, of course, doesn't prevent government from taxing it in the future. But of course, they would probably never win an election after that if they did. So, if you want to look at what happens when that kind of thing happens, you need only look to, it was a conservative government that removed what was it called? The income trust taxation structure that existed. It only still continues to exist for REITs, real estate investment trusts, or income trusts. And so there was a favorable tax structure on that many, many years ago, and the government changed it because they were starting to lose a lot of revenue because of it. So, and it was quite a controversy when they did it. They did signal for a number of years they were going to do it. I think a lot of people just ignored it, thinking it wouldn't happen. But when it did, it had quite a calamitous effect on a lot of people's incomes in retirement. So government will make those kinds of changes when they're forced to. And my point is, it seems quite likely that at some point in the future, the government is going to be forced to. And so what that means, as part of your thinking, because this is speculation, we can't know what's going to happen. But we do have the option, like if we're not maxing out both our tax-free savings account and our RRSP, then we have the option of where we're putting the more money. And we can choose to pay more up front in our tax-free savings by going into a tax-free savings account, because we have to pay tax on the money before it goes into the TFSA, and then reaping the benefit down the road of not having the government clutching at it with the tax system when we take the money out of the tax-free savings account when we retire. The RRSP, on the other hand, great vehicle for the right circumstances, but if we put our money in it, now we are absolutely going to be at the government's mercy from a taxation point of view in the future. And that future very much looks like tax rates are going to have to increase, and the things that are taxed is going to have to increase. Because the only other option the government has is to cut services, which, I mean, they've done it in the past. The 90s, the Liberal government of the 90s with Paul Martin as finance minister did that very aggressively because it was desperately needed. It was painful, and consequently, they got a conservative government after that. Nobody loves the government when they're cutting, but they did the right thing. They were wise, and it was painful. And for those that remember it, which would be people probably over 40, those were tough times. There was a lot of austerity. There was a lot of government services that were cut back, which also meant there was a lot of government workers laid off. And government services included big cutbacks in healthcare and education. It was a very difficult time, but very much needed and helped lay a foundation for the prosperity we have today. But now we're faced with these choices, and again, I'm not criticizing what the government's doing. I really don't have an opinion about it. I have some ideas and questions, but they're doing what they're doing under these difficult circumstances. But there are going to be knock-on effects to this. And so as we're doing our planning and we're thinking about tax-free savings account versus RRSP, it's very important to do serious, comprehensive planning so you know not only what am I doing now and what am I getting out of it, but how am I getting my money out in the future and what's the tax picture of that going to look like? And you're making your choices wisely and fully informed based on that. There is not going to be a right answer. There's going to be the answer of, well, given all the variables and the circumstances, here's what I'm confident and comfortable doing. So wanted to share that with you today because, again, the TFSA versus RRSP is a question that comes up all the time, and it's got many interesting nuances to it. My biggest advice to you is you either have to do all the homework to really understand the implications of these programs and the tax choices you're making for today and the future when you choose these programs, which one you're going to put your money into, or work with an advisor that you trust and that is going to help you to understand the choices that you're making so that you can make wise, well-informed choices. We're going to do another program later that shows the results for people who work with advisors, that generally they do better financially in the long run by working with an advisor. But many people are choosing to do it independently, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's lots of tools out there, but you really have to avail yourself of them and be well informed and very confident that you're making a very good decision, because you're going to live with the results of your decisions in the future, and you can't undo them once you get there. So hope that's helped you out today. Always happy to answer questions. If you've got questions of your own about your own tax-free savings account or RRSP, send them our way. We're happy to answer them. Thanks very much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to do these. And if you've got other questions, send them our way, because we use those to form the basis of our upcoming episodes. Want to thank our sponsors again, the Simple Plan Life Insurance. You can go to getthesimpleplan.com/quotes to find out how much life insurance might cost for you from all major Canadian insurers. You can also check maybe there's an opportunity for your rates to go down based on what you're paying and what age you're at, because rates have been going down for many years now. Also, if you're not sure how much life insurance you should have, we recommend that you do a comprehensive calculation, not just of a rule of thumb, 10 to 12 times your income. That's okay. That's not bad as a starting point, but you can do a better, more comprehensive calculation suited to your specific situation at getthesimpleplan.com/how much. Again, you can go and try out the Simple Plan Retirement Calculator to figure out how much money you should be saving in order to live the lifestyle you're looking forward to in retirement. That's at bit.ly/SP Retire Calc. That's bit.ly/SP Retire Calc, and that's all lowercase. Again, I'm Brad Macbeth from the Simple Plan. Thanks very much for joining us today. You can find us on Facebook at Macbeth Group. You can also find us on Twitter at Cash Coach Canada and Instagram at Macbeth Group. Really appreciate you. We will be back next week with our next episode. Look forward to sharing it with you then. Have a great weekend.